Welcome. I thought I'd make this video because I had some problems with the fuel pump of my Kawasaki ZZR 1200 and I wanted to replace the contacts, and the website of my supplier said that the kit that works for almost every fuel pump of almost every Japanese bike isn't compatible with the fuel pump of the ZZR 1200. So I was a bit set back by that, but then I saw a video of someone on the internet opening the fuel pump of this specific bike and it revealed an electronics board, and once you got that out of the way, the pump looked very similar to the pumps of all those other bikes. So I suspected that the contacts were the same as well. So I took a little bit of risk and bought the contacts, and I replaced them on my other fuel pumps. So now I make a video of me doing it again on this pump that has the same sort of problem. So you start by opening the glued on cap at the end. All credits to the original poster that I got this technique from. It just takes some trial and error, so you crack it a bit open at the sides by using a little bit of force, and you don't need to crack the housing in full, but just need to get the glue on the edges to get loose by using a utility knife or scraping it away. There isn't a lot of glue, it's almost only on the surface of the cap and not really in between. So when you scrape it away and keep cracking with the pliers, after a bit of trial and error it pops out. But as I said, I didn't invent this technique myself, so all credits to the original poster that I got this from. I suspect the electronics board in the pump replaces the fuel relay that is normally present on the most of the carbureted bikes, and that this also provides the function that once you start or press the start button briefly, the pumps keep priming even if you don't continue to start. I noticed the ZZR 600 doesn't do this. I had this bike in my possession briefly, so I thought that it was broken, but it's just something I think specifically for the 1200, that once you press the start button it just keeps priming. I find this feature very useful, so I think it's a good feature, but well, it makes for a bit of a different fuel pump. So if you want to revise the contacts, you need to remove this electronics board, and that makes it a bit more tedious, the process of replacing the contacts, than for regular fuel pumps. I mean, there are a lot of videos available about replacing contacts, so you don't need to watch this video for that purpose, but I haven't found a video doing it for this specific fuel pump. Look, there it pops off, and now you can see the electronics pin exposed. It is held in place by a screw, so let's just remove that, and then we'll get on from there. Once you remove the screw, the cap comes loose, but it doesn't give a lot of room. The wires going to the pump are very short, and I find it a bit of impossible to desolder the wire that goes to the contacts, and it is necessary to replace them. Maybe if you try very carefully without melting the housing, you can do that, but I think it's easier to just desolder the red and black wire that goes to the print and then remove the coupling fully. That makes it a lot easier to replace those contacts. Before you start desoldering, I suggest to take a picture of the location of the wires so you know exactly how to put them back. Of course, any information in this video is for educational purposes only. I accept no liability whatsoever, so do this procedure at your own risk. But for me, it worked. Once the wires come loose, you can remove the cap in whole. I mean, it is still held together at the back by a wire, but at least it gives you a lot more room to get the new contact points in place. As you can see, it's now pretty much exposed. So the next step is to desolder the other wire that is soldered to the contacts. But this is the same procedure as for all other fuel pumps. So if you find this video not quite clear enough about how to do this, you can also watch other tutorial videos about replacing the contacts on your fuel pump. So now the wire is desoldered, we can remove the contacts by removing the screws. On both screws there is a wire with a ring connector attached. So you have to get these both in place when you put the new contacts in. Once both screws are undone, the contacts come loose. And you can see when I get them in the shot that the contacts are not looking very well. So it's good we are replacing them because they look a bit, at least not flat anymore. So I expect they're not making contact very well, which explains why the pump isn't pumping well when it is hot. I mean, this problem only occurs when the bike is really hot. When it's cold, the pump works fine. So that's the symptom I was trying to fix. So if that get that wire with the ring connector underneath the screw when you get to fastening the new contacts. And also keep in mind that when you install new contacts, that the tang of the contacts has to fall in the inset of the axle of the solenoid. I mean, there are a lot of YouTube videos that show that. It's not shown very clearly here. Try to show it a bit, but the sun is a bit in the way, the reflection. So that has to go in the inside of the axle. But if you find this not clear in this video, check out another video. I mean, replacing contacts, there are a lot of videos that show very well in a controlled environment how to do that. And this video was more focused on the electronics board, because that's a bit unique about this pump. Now, once the contacts are in place, we have to get back to soldering again, because the wire that was connected to the old contacts has to be soldered to the new contacts again. I start, as do most other videos, by filling up the gap with solder, and then you just have to heat that up to a melting point and stick the wire in, and then it's soldered. I think that's the best way to do it. I try to show it here. So melt the solder that you put into the gap, stick the wire in, and then it's soldered well in place. Now the next step is getting the red and the black wire back through the hole again, and that's a bit of a pickle. The first time I just did this by a lot of trial and error, using pliers and all sorts of tools, and eventually that works out. I mean, you can do that, but afterwards I thought I should have used a bit of heat shrink tubing to extend the wires a bit. That makes it easier. So this is a first attempt at trying that. So I shrink the heat shrink tubing to the wires and shrink the other end a bit, and it's quite easy to stick it through the hole and to guide the wires through the hole when putting on the cap. As you can see here, it's not very difficult to do it this way. So I really think this is works at least a lot better than just trying to get the wires to go through the hole, especially because there are some other wires on the inside that prevent this a bit. So now they are in place and the cap is, well, sort of in place. Not quite, so check if it really sits on the pump right and flat, because this one doesn't, and that is caused because the wires underneath the contact screws, well, that one ring that is there, that sits a bit against a lower portion of the cap, so I have to rotate that a bit. And I don't think you can really find it out before getting the other wires through, but maybe you can. So you can do it right in one attempt. So I rotate this wire slightly and then bend it a little, so I make sure it doesn't well, sits in the way of the tang that has to go up and down. Well, of course, now I have to do the heat shrink tubing thingy again. So I just take a new piece of heat shrink tube and we'll do the same procedure, but we've seen that it works, so that is not too exciting. Once again, the wires are through, and as you can see now, the cap is now really seating against the pump, flat. So I screw it in place with that one screw. I mean, it doesn't have to be particularly tight. And we can start soldering the red and black wire in place again. You can refer to the picture you've taken. Before you do that, inspect the contacts that you desoldered, because in my case I actually bridged the two pads together when desoldering them, so I have to clean up that solder, because otherwise I short out the electronic board, and we don't want to do that, because then I think you have to get a new pump, if that is possible at all. So clean up the contacts to make sure that there's no shorts there. And soldering these wires in place is not very difficult, just press them against the pad that they're supposed to go and get the soldering iron in place, and they're good to go. And after you've soldered everything in place, you can put the glue cap in place again. That might be a good idea to remove the excess glue with a utility knife and clean it up a bit before gluing it into place. And I'd also suggest, before gluing everything back together, to test if the pump works. So we'll get to that soon. But I first finish up cleaning up the cap and check out if it fits. But that's, of course it fits, because it came out of that place. Before I actually glue it, we should check if the pump works. I made a sort of thingy that puts the two pins. There is in the service manual, there is a diagram of how to test the pump. So you have to attach the red and the yellow wire to the plus voltage. I'm using a lab supply here, but you can of course also use a battery, the battery of your bike, to do that. And then also in the service manual it says to connect the black wire to ground. I don't think that is correct, because the ground on the ZZR 1200 is usually a yellow black wire, or black with a yellow stripe, and connecting the black wire doesn't run the pump, so don't get freaked out by that, but try the yellow black wire, and when you do that you should hear it running. Don't forget to glue the cap and then put it back in your bike.